So this is the kit that we're going to have a look at to apply all these techniques and these use all these different tools and look at the most effective ways of doing them. It was pretty cheap, as you can see. It was a knockdown price, but it's good value anyway. It's a 1/48 scale Curtis Warhawk, and it's a lovely new kit from FX. Got the instructions, which are well laid out, with a couple of interesting paintbrush-friendly colour schemes. And there's call-outs for different colours as we go through. It's worth looking up references on the internet as well. Things might be a little bit out here, or they might be a bit basic, so have a look for examples of this particular aircraft and bear those in mind while you're building. Got the decal sheet, which is very nice, and includes some control panel decals there, which will come in handy, I expect. We've got clear parts in a separate bag. Looks like there's different ones for open and closed canopy. They're all very nice. And then the main parts themselves, good detail, interior detail, lovely. There are some things to watch. On here we can see there's some round marks in the wheel wells, which are ejector pin marks where the sprue was pushed out of the mould, and they'll need dealing with because they'll be visible otherwise. But mostly FX will try to ensure that those injector pin marks are on the inside faces where it's not going to be very important. I have done a little research on the build of this particular kit, and people have mentioned that the fit of these panels that go in these recesses here isn't necessarily that great, and the instructions have you put the fuselage together and then put these panels in. I'm going to try gluing those panels in before we stick the fuselage halves together, in the hope that we'll get a better finish on those. So it's worth doing research on that as well. So nice looking kit, great detail, and we'll see how we get along with it. So we'll use this as an example to cover various tips and tricks and the use of different tools as we go along. There we go, should be fun. Okay, it's time to do some building. So first thing is the very basic task, I suppose, of cutting the parts from the sprue. So I just use a scalpel knife, and we'll just go in here and kind of sawing motion or pulling back. Do that a couple of times and it should come off. I've cut the others off already. Now you're going to end up, it's best to leave a bit of spare on there. You're going to end up with a part like this that needs a little bit of trimming. So just trim that off with a scalpel. Don't go mad at it, because when we come to fit this together, we'll be sanding that joint anyway, so we can clean that up. But go around and just clean up all of those marks and points where the sprues were connected a little bit. As I say, we'll deal with the rest later on. So that's it for large parts. That's pretty straightforward. If you've got very small parts, I don't think there are any particularly tiny parts on here, but for very small parts, it's a good idea to put your finger over the part while you're cutting it off, and that way it won't leap into the jaws of the carpet monster and be lost forever. So just while you cut, just keep your finger on very tiny parts and they won't spring off. So we've got a part cut here, and I mentioned that we were going to try and fit these before we put the fuselage halves together. I'm not sure if that's the right one. We get the right one. That looks like a better fit. So that's the right one. And the instructions suggest that we put the fuselage halves together, and then we cut these bits out, and then we fit these. As I say, I'm going to try fitting these before we put the fuselage halves together, just to try and improve the fit. So we've got the part. Firstly, we need to clean this up a little bit. So let's just take those down, cut it off, and then scrape it with the blade. That will give you a nice clean edge. Do the same for this one. This plastic is quite soft, which is good in some ways, but generally speaking I prefer a harder plastic. But this is the way kits seem to be at the moment. You generally use pretty soft plastic. So that should hopefully fit in. Let's do as they suggest and cut out this piece. We'll also see on some of these parts, particularly on older mouldings, there'll be some flash to deal with, which is bits of where the plastic is squeezed out between the moulds, the halves, and you have a bit of excess to deal with, to trim off. So your knife will just do that job easily enough in most cases. So let's tidy that up a little bit. Right, that's looking quite smooth. And see if this part goes in neatly. It goes in reasonably neatly, but it's not brilliant. Okay, I'll do a bit more fettling on this, and then we'll come back and glue it. Okay, I've cleaned this part up. Took a bit of doing actually, but some scraping and some sanding has got that in a neater position, so it'll fit better in here. So that joint there looks pretty decent. I just hold that in place and glue, if at all possible, from the back side every time. So a little dab of glue. Let that run into the joint. We'll just do this corner first because we've got a nice good fit on that. So take that away. It needs to dry for a little while, but it will dry reasonably quickly with the Tamiya glue. And then we can just push the top joint into position a bit better and apply something to the back of that one. So a dot of glue on there as well, and let's just push that in place. If it's a particularly resistant joint, it doesn't want to hold, then you can use clamps, or you could use, I'd avoid using tape to be honest, because glue will seep under the tape all too easily and ruin everything either side of it. Can destroy all the detail. So you can see that by doing it bit by bit, we're not trying to get the whole thing done in one go. So it's best to leave that glue just a few seconds really, or a minute or so to dry, and then we can try getting the front together. So let's hold the front in position, put a bit of glue on that, and just make sure that it's sitting nicely. That's pretty well in place. This plastic does react very nicely to the glue, so you get a good clean result with the Tamiya extra thin on this plastic. And just make sure that that is nicely lined up. When it comes to filling, if you can avoid filling by careful gluing, that's the way to go. There will be some filling needed somewhere along the line, but if it can be avoided, that's the best approach. Right, and then this last top one, I think we'll get a bit of glue in, let that run into the joint, and then just squeeze it into position. A little bit of a blow on there will help it dry a little bit quicker. And that's that nose section together. It might need holding a little bit longer to get it to dry nicely, but hopefully this will give us a better alignment for the whole of the fuselage. So with those little spots of glue in, that's it pretty much done.